In the flicker of headlines and the hum of social media, a name has been whispered with increasing urgency: Crockett. In those first heartbeats of news, a single image surfaced: Crockett's eyes, sharp as broken glass, locked onto Robert's crumbling facade. It was a moment pregnant with tension, a clash that nobody saw coming, yet everyone sensed was inevitable. Have you ever witnessed someone you admired unravel in real time? Felt the shock ripple through a room as a trusted figure's secrets spilled into daylight? That's exactly the shockwave Crockett delivered when he pulled back the curtain on Robert's fatal public backfire. And now, you're about to ride the same wave. Imagine waking up to discover that the man celebrated for his brilliance, lauded for his innovation, had been hiding a mistake so colossal it threatened everything he'd built. That's where our story begins, on the knife's edge between triumph and ruin. Roberts once stood at the apex of his career, a household name, a visionary whose every word was quoted, whose every move was dissected. A pioneer in his field, whether technology, politics, or finance, Roberts had carved a legend. People believed in him, investors poured billions, young professionals modeled their ambitions on his. Then, almost overnight, he became the protagonist of a cautionary tale, a tragedy unfolding in public view. How could someone so revered stumble so spectacularly? And more intriguingly, who had the courage to expose the flaw before it consumed the legend entirely? Enter Crockett. Crockett and Roberts weren't strangers. Their paths had crossed in boardrooms, at gala dinners, perhaps even on conference stages. They shared acquaintances, perhaps ambitions. On the surface, Crockett was an ally. Courteous, unassuming, the kind of professional who listened more than he spoke, who took notes but rarely drew attention. Yet behind that calm exterior lay a mind razor-sharp, one that dissected details others glossed over. While the world basked in Robert's glow, Crockett noticed the cracks. Maybe it was a footnote in a report, an inconsistency between public statements and private calculations. Maybe it was late-night memos, quietly circulated, hinting at deeper troubles. Whatever the spark, Crockett's curiosity morphed into conviction. Something was off, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth. Stories like this often start with a whisper. In a dimly lit office, Crockett's fingers flew over the keyboard, piecing together fragments of data, chasing leads that led him down tangles of financial records, whispered phone calls, and guarded emails. Suspicion gave way to certainty when he found the document Roberts had hoped nobody would see, a flawed projection, hidden beneath layers of polished presentations. That projection, if unchecked, would collapse under scrutiny, destroying not only Roberts' reputation, but the livelihoods of countless people who had placed their trust and their money in his hands. Crockett knew the stakes. Exposing this flaw meant turning his back on the industry's unwritten code of silence. It meant potentially alienating powerful allies, risking his own career. But the choice was clear. Integrity demanded he act. As the morning sun climbed above skyscrapers, Crockett prepared his revelation. He drafted an email to a select few colleagues, experts known for their discretion and their integrity, laying out the evidence in painstaking detail. He included charts, spreadsheets, an annotated timeline showing how Robert's projections diverged from reality. The response was a mixture of disbelief and dread. Some couldn't believe Roberts could be wrong. Others feared the implications of going public. Yet in hushed agreements, they recognized the same imperative. The truth had to come out before more damage was done. Their silence was a contagion, and Crockett was determined to immunize the system. The decision to go public transformed Crockett overnight, from anonymous investigator to reluctant whistleblower. He chose a respected independent journal, one known for ruthless fact-checking and fearless reporting. In a private meeting with the editor, Crockett handed over his dossier. He watched as the editor's face turned from curiosity to shock. The weight of evidence laid bare was undeniable. The editor promised discretion while mobilizing a team of journalists to verify every detail. Weeks passed in a blur of interviews, cross-referencing sources, reconstructing timelines. Meanwhile, rumors of a coming exposé buzzed like static electricity through the community. Those closest to Roberts began to feel a dark cloud gathering, though few could predict its magnitude. Then came the day of reckoning. The article went live just as the market opened, an inconspicuous link in a reputable publication. No pomp, no fanfare, just facts and figures. The headline was stark, inside the calculation that could cost Roberts everything. Within minutes, Industry forums exploded with speculation. Why now? Who allowed this? Was it true? Street chatter turned to calls wailing through phone lines, ringing into boardrooms and trading floors. Investors scrambled to reevaluate positions. Competitors, once polite rivals, sharpened their claws, sensing opportunity in the chaos. Roberts, flying overseas for a conference, received a cryptic message, "Call me immediately." He didn't want to look at the article, but he had no choice. As he scrolled through the damning analysis, his composure frayed. Each line felt like a betrayal, of colleagues, of clients, perhaps of himself. In that moment, he confronted the abysmal gap between his reality and the image he'd projected to the world. In public, Roberts tried to maintain calm. He issued a statement acknowledging unexpected challenges and promising a thorough review. But the carefully chosen words only amplified the suspicion. People read between the lines. Unexpected felt like a euphemism. Thorough review, like a stalling tactic. Journalists pressed for specifics. Analysts deconstructed every syllable. Social media, a crucible of opinion, boiled over with memes mocking Roberts' downfall. The man who once commanded respect now faced derision at every turn. And through it all, Crockett watched, never gloating, but resolute, knowing that the arc of justice was bending, however imperfectly, toward accountability. It would be simplistic to paint Roberts as villain and Crockett as hero. After all, Roberts had supporters who swore his error was unintentional, an oversight in an otherwise stellar career. They pointed to his philanthropic work, his mentorship of young professionals, his contributions to industry innovation. They begged for nuance. Humans err, they argued, and heroes sometimes stumble. Yet the flaw Crockett exposed wasn't a simple miscalculation. It was a systemic failure, a willful bending of projections to suit a public image. If left unchecked, it would have led to catastrophic financial losses and shattered trust. Roberts' defenders faced a moral dilemma: stand by a man they admired or acknowledge that nobody, however accomplished, is above scrutiny. Meanwhile, Crockett's journey took unexpected turns. Once the article broke, his inbox overflowed with offers, a mix of gratitude, curiosity, and opportunism. Journalists sought interviews. Think tanks invited him to speak. Investors asked his opinion. But Crockett stayed grounded, mindful that the real work had only begun. He realized that exposing Roberts' error was the tip of the iceberg. The episode revealed deeper flaws in the industry, a culture that rewarded hype over substance, where charisma eclipsed competence. He drafted proposals for new auditing standards, convened roundtables with legal experts, and began advocating for transparency initiatives designed to prevent another Roberts fiasco. Slowly, those efforts built momentum. The industry's self-examination became a movement, driven by the uncomfortable truth that nobody should be immune from accountability. Back in the eye of the storm, Roberts felt the walls closing in. Board members called emergency sessions. Key partners distanced themselves. His public appearances shrank from packed auditoriums to terse, low-profile interviews. He retreated to his study, walls lined with awards he had once held with pride. Now, they felt like hollow tokens of a bygone era. In solitude, Roberts wrestled with regret. Did he start cutting corners to chase growth? Was it hubris that blinded him to warning signs? He replayed memories of late nights poring over reports, of dismissing concerns raised by analysts. In those moments of reflection, a crucial question crystallized. Could he rebuild trust, even in a diminished capacity? Or was his career irreparably compromised? As months passed, the industry slowly absorbed the shockwave. Some firms voluntarily adopted stricter oversight protocols. Regulators announced investigations. Universities incorporated case studies of Roberts' downfall into ethics courses. Crockett's name became synonymous with integrity, yet he remained modest, redirecting attention towards systemic solutions rather than personal accolades. He spoke candidly about the toll whistleblowers endure: threats, isolation, the lingering question of whether one did the right thing. His message resonated beyond business circles, touching on universal themes: the price of truth, the fragility of reputation, the power of one individual to challenge a titan. And then, in a twist neither Crockett nor Roberts could have scripted, fate offered redemption. A year after the expose, a joint task force released its final report. Crockett's revelations had prevented losses estimated at billions, and new safeguards had been implemented industry-wide. Roberts, in a public forum, spoke for the first time since the crisis with humility and candor. He admitted mistakes, took responsibility, and announced plans to support transparency initiatives proposed by Crockett. The moment felt surreal. Two figures once locked in conflict now standing on the same stage, united by hard-won lessons. For many, it signaled that accountability and redemption could coexist, that a fall from grace didn't necessarily mark the end of one story. Yet the narrative doesn't end there. Behind every headline, every speech, every reform, lie untold stories of individuals caught in the crossfire. Employees whose jobs teetered on the brink, investors who faced financial ruin, families who watched a loved one's legacy crumble. Some found solace in the reforms. Others remained skeptical, believing that powerful figures would always find new ways to conceal their missteps. Crockett understood this unease. He championed continuous vigilance, reminding audiences that transparency isn't a one-time fix, but a lifelong commitment. In quiet moments, Crockett reflected on what had driven him from that first spark of suspicion to the thunderous revelations that followed. He thought about the moral imperative that propelled him forward, even when the path was lonely and fraught with risk. He realized that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. In exposing Roberts' fatal miscalculation, he had risked his career, his reputation, and yet he emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. His story became a testament to the power of integrity in a world too often seduced by spectacle. Roberts, too, faced his own reckoning. The public's gaze, once fixated on his achievements, now rested on his contrition and his efforts to rebuild. Some saw that transformation as genuine. Others dismissed it as a calculated move to salvage his name. But regardless of opinion, Roberts had confronted uncomfortable truths, that brilliance doesn't grant immunity from error, that legacy is forged not only in triumph, but in how one responds to failure. He dedicated himself to mentoring a new generation of leaders, emphasizing ethical decision-making over blind ambition. In doing so, he hoped to turn his downfall into a beacon that warned others of the seductive pull of shortcuts. As the dust settled, the industry itched with the question, who would be the next Roberts? Who might be hiding the next fatal projection in plain sight? Crockett couldn't answer that, but he urged organizations not to wait for another scandal. He encouraged building cultures where questioning wasn't discouraged, where dissenting voices were heard, not silenced. Through workshops and speaking engagements, he taught teams to read between the lines of polished presentations, to ask uncomfortable questions, to value substance over style. His message echoed beyond boardrooms, reaching anyone who recognized that transparency starts at home, in everyday interactions where honesty and accountability matter. In the final analysis, Crockett's exposé wasn't just about Roberts' mistake. It was a mirror held up to an industry, and perhaps to society at large, revealing the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fragility of trust. It reminded us that public figures, no matter how towering, can fall if the foundations of their success are built on illusions. But it also reminded us that uncovering the truth can be an act of service, a way to protect communities and uphold values that transcend individual gain. So what lessons linger as we close this chapter? First, that vigilance is a daily discipline. No matter how comforting a narrative seems, it's worth probing beneath the surface. Second, that ethical courage doesn't always make headlines, but when it does, it can change the course of history. And third, that redemption, though elusive, remains possible when honesty prevails over pride. In the end, as you reflect on Crockett's journey, his moment of discovery, his tense decision to go public, the fallout that unraveled Roberts' empire, and the modest step toward industry-wide reform, ask yourself, are you paying attention to the projections and promises in your own world? Or might you have accepted a glossy presentation without questioning the data behind it? Who in your own life could benefit from a measured dose of inquiry and integrity? These questions may not lead to billion-dollar revelations, but they could safeguard the trust in your relationships and the credibility of your own efforts. Now, as the last echoes of this story settle into silence, remember that the fight for truth doesn't end with one exposé or one redemption. It continues every time we choose integrity over convenience, accountability over apathy, courage over comfort. And if you're ready to stay vigilant, to ask the hard questions, and to champion transparency in your corner of the world, Then join us on this journey. Subscribe for more stories that cut through the noise and shine a light on the truths that matter.